In college, Tim Tebow's unconventional throwing motion took roughly 0.6 of a second to complete. About 0.2 of a second slower than the average for all the NFL quarterbacks we've analyzed. On his pro day in 2010, Tebow unveiled what was supposed to be a new and improved throwing motion, bringing the ball up roughly 12 inches higher after the snap. This allowed the ball to travel 25% less distance through the motion, and he appeared to shave roughly 10% off his typical release time. But NFL defenders train to get to a quarterback in 3 seconds or less. And our analysis reveals that under this intense pressure, Tebow has largely reverted back to his old throwing motion. From high school to college, and now in the NFL, his average release time has always been around 0.6 of a second. Now, changing an ingrained habit is a lot harder than you might think, and Tim Tebow could be considered a case study in the power of muscle memory. Throughout his life in football, Tebow has thrown hundreds of thousands of passes, and this repetition strengthens the connections between the brain's 10 trillion neurons. Through a process called potentiation, neurons that fire together repeatedly, communicating with other neurons in about 1 millisecond, all fire in the same pattern again in the future. This is part of the hard wiring we call muscle memory. But when establishing new patterns, like changing a throwing motion, neurons can work up to 10 times slower. And this is why it will take tens of thousands of reps for Tebow to truly change his throwing motion. But relying on his old motion isn't necessarily bad news, because muscle memory enables the brain to focus on other tasks at hand, like moving the ball down the field. For critics who say that Tim Tebow's relatively slow release is cause for concern, keep this in mind. In his college career, Tebow actually set more SEC passing records than rushing records. For ESPN Sports Science, I'm John Brinkus.